The Jagged Orbit by John Brunner, 1969. The setting, New York City, 2014. Social unrest and extreme violence. Racism is rampant. In the novel, blacks are called knees and whites are called blanks. Technology has advanced to the point where there is constant surveillance. In this world, we meet a spool pigeon. This is what we might think of as an online reporter. His name, Matthew Flayman. He is investigating a group called the Gottschalk. Think of the Gottschalk family as mafia. They are promoting violence so that they can sell arms. Flayman's media company is in danger of being bought or controlled by the Gottschalks. In this society, we also have mental institutions with many, many patients. In the mental institution, we have a number of doctors as characters, and we also have a patient who has amazing technological skills. This large, intelligent man is a knee or a black person. One doctor wonders if he should have ever been institutionalized. There's another investigation to see if people are being committed to these institutions to quiet them. Michael Flayman's wife is one of the people who is institutionalized. This novel also has a telepathic component. There are telepathic entertainers who, when they take a certain drug, will be able to read people's minds and perhaps even see the future. Another character is Professor Xavier Conroy, an academic who left the United States on fear of being arrested. He teaches at the University of North Manitoba in Manitoba, Canada. That's my province, fictional university. This group of characters find each other. Together, they challenge the whole system. The Jagged Orbit is a novel of ambition. At 400 pages, it's rather a large novel for the 1960s. It has what I usually call a braided plot. We follow many different characters in alternating chapters. They all come together in the climax of the novel. I want to read you some quotes from the novel. The first quote comes from page 10. I think it's a good example of John Brunner's writing. Our protagonist, Michael Flayman, is just waking up. Piecemeal, he grappled together the dispersed fragments of his personality until he had enough control over his limbs to get up. Superficially noted long ago, categorized as a quotable quote because it touched so directly on his line of work, a dictum by Xavier Conroy drifted out of his subconscious. Western culture is undergoing a process of transition from guilt-oriented with a conscience to shame-oriented with a morbid fear of being found out. Lately, the words have been festering in his brain like the mark of a brand applied at too low a temperature to cauterize and sterilize the site of the burn. Many things in John Brunner's novel really hit home with today. Well, as the novel goes on, things go off the rail. Further in the novel, on page 140, Professor Conroy observes, one can tentatively point to three major causes which, like tectonic events in the deep strata of the Earth's crust, not only produce reverberations over the enormous areas, but actually create discontinuities sharp enough to be uniquely attributed, what one might call psychological landslides. By far the most striking of these three is the unforeseen rejection of rationality, which has overtaken us. Number one, rejection of rationality. The second one? Closely allied to this first factor is the second, which might be termed the socialization of paranoia. In a single generation, individual anxiety at our inability to deal with the massed resources of computerized corporations, government agencies, and other public bodies has resulted in the mushrooming of contract law into a larger industry than advertising. So number two, the socialization of paranoia, or we might call it anxiety. And the third factor is that we have nowhere to turn to. Society is falling apart. We can't trust our governments. Our churches can't speak to the circumstances. And the people are getting more and more racially segregated. Violence is espoused by the Gottschalks. Chilling, isn't it? John Brunner wrote this in the late 1960s. If you think back in history to that time period, You can see the unrest that he is extrapolating from. But the chilling part to me is how much he gets right about our culture today. When it comes to social extrapolation, I think John Brunner may be the best science fiction author that I've read. Is The Jagged Orbit any good? Yes, it is. It comes on the heels of his most famous novel, Stand on Zanzibar. This is John Brunner at the peak of his career. It's not an easy novel to read, but there are rewards in plot, character, and societal developments. As you may guess from the quotes that I shared with you, this novel isn't an easy novel to read. I found it took me almost 100 of the 400 pages to really get into it. But the world building, the plot, and the characters were strong. It definitely has something to say about the society that we live in today. This challenging and chilling novel was a Nebula Award finalist. I give The Jagged Orbit 8 out of 10. Have you read any of John Brunner's work? The Jagged Orbit is the second novel that I've read by Brunner. The first one was called The Whole Man from 1964. I believe in the UK it was called The Telepathist. It is a tale of telepathy. It is about a man who is disabled physically but is very strong in telepathy. It's a more traditional science fiction story. I enjoyed it. I do plan to read Stand on Zanzibar sometime in the future. So, find a good vintage SF book, perhaps one by John Brunner, and keep reading.